Hey, I'm Kelly Lui, the shorts programmer at Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. Welcome to this Q&A session for the shorts program Collective Memory. I'm super excited to introduce our moderator for today's session, Sahar Gulshan, who will be chatting with our talented guests from the films here. Sahar is a writer and a filmmaker. She was also a member of Real Asian's programming committee for the festival this past year. Before I pass it off to Sahar, I'd like to thank the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in Toronto for their support in presenting this Q&A session. The participation of the filmmakers and talent was made possible with support from the CBC. During this session, feel free to drop your questions for the films in the question box just on top of the chat bar to the right of the screen. Or if you're on your phone, you'll just have to scroll down below this video to see that question box. We're also hosting an ongoing and lively conversation on the Real Asian Film Forum on Discord. So make sure when you enter, there is a welcome code of conduct message that you must read through. And once you've consented to it, you just need to click on the green icon with a check mark before you can unlock the other threads. Finally, Real Asian strives to create a safe and accessible online space for folks to gather. Our festival code of conduct can be found on our website at realasian.com/code of conduct. And we encourage you to read it and give it your support. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome up Sahar.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Welcome everyone to our Q&A on the Shorts Showcase Collective Memory. We are so privileged and honored today because we get to have 7 of the filmmakers who made the 7 beautiful documentaries here today. And we start with Chris Wing, who is the filmmaker of Trails. He has an incredible documentary that explores collective memory through family, through social and political circumstance. Welcome everyone to Chris Wing and his incredible film Trails. Hi, Chris.
Hi, everyone.
It's great to be with you, especially because in this showcase, there's such an exploration of so many images and themes. One particularly is water, and your film begins and ends with water. It's not the only image, there are many, but I find that it's very sort of creatively and non-traditionally portrayed. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of water, its imagery in this film, Trails?
Mm-hmm. In Vietnamese culture, I mean, I think as it was described in one of the title cards, is that it's both the word for nation, home. It's coming from both the shortened words of both where land and water meet, which just gets shortened down to water. And so for me, coming from Vietnamese culture and specifically from South Vietnamese kind of refugee kind of experience, so much of that experience is based off of just, diaspora displacement and in turn placemaking in regards to that. So it's so much about like, how do you kind of try to find a language to express that? And so I for me, based off that and just trying to hone in on what would be that specificity of like a refugee or diasporic, lensing, I just kind of went deeper into that. So water was the closest thing to me. And then in regards to that lensing, like how do I go deeper and deeper and what is kind of the sensory ephemeral portions of that? So.
Very nice. Yeah, I love that it's such a theme in your film and so many of the others. It's such a great way to start, as I've said. Mm-hmm. Your film is, of course, a big film about memory. There are images of an empty parking lot in Orange County's Little Saigon, and they're juxtaposed with audio of many very significant political, social moments in the diasporic community. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship to absence and memory that we see so significantly in Trails?
Yeah, so I mean, a big portion of that, in regards to absence and memory, was, so much of this work was kind of created out of looking out of archives and thinking about how things were built, how things were maintained, how especially in regards to power. So I kind of came out of this out of spending a lot of time at Visual Communications Archive, which is kind of built out of a tradition of Asian American filmmakers, specifically coming out of Japanese internment, as well as going to a community archive at UCI, which they're Southeast Asian archive, and that's a community archive that's been built. Especially coming from a culture where sorry.
I can still hear and see you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I had the Google thing on the other side. And kind of building out of those kind of spaces, and particularly kind of out of a history from Vietnamese culture. It's like, the depictions historically have been kind of based out of really much colonialism. So you have both like the Lumiere brothers and depicting kind of the historical of in Vietnam, or, strictly just conflict photography, out of the US kind of news reportage thing. So I was really thinking about, how would self-representation look in regards to that, especially on a certain budget that I'm thinking about, and thinking about how do I extend that amount of history and kind of express that. So everything from the original video of, me and my cousins on the water as some sort of reflection of, the Vietnamese boat people in regards, and then in that comparison to where we're looking at the neighborhood now, and just how so much has changed from that moment, and then how do we reflect kind of that feelings of consequence in juxtaposition of that. So there's all the movement of bodies to the neighborhood eventually that have been built, and then there's also the treatment of the bodies in public media and media in general up to that point. And so those are the things that I'm interplaying and what I'm thinking about and what I was trying to explore with that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm wondering, just to finish, if you could tell us a little bit about your approach to this film, because obviously it's a documentary, but were you influenced by books, poetry, or other forms of art? Because it really seems like it's influenced in this film.
Yeah, so I kind of threw everything at it. So there's everything from Ria Tajiri and Bob Nakamura's Manzanar and History and Memory, just from an Asian American's perspective. In terms of landscape photography, I'm pulling from Anne Mai Le, who did both Vietnamese war reenactments, the Iraq war reenactments, as well as just photographs in Vietnam when she came back. Gregory Crewdson and James Benning in terms of time. Tim Hetherington in terms of just the subjectivity of especially his short film Diary. Diary. And so there's just, that interplay of trying to think about how do I get these collages of ideas and images and kind of trying to create something new, especially when there's, in regards to when we were talking about power and representation, especially pulling from Viet Thanh Nguyen's book, Nothing Ever Dies, there's just hasn't been a space for that, especially film is such a highly capital medium. It's not a lot of access and ability. And so I kind of wanted to find a space to explore that. And so I give a lot of credit to Visual Communications and UCLA's Ethno Communications for giving me that space originally to kind of develop that. So.
Excellent. You can really see all the influences and the sort of multi-genre, multimedia approaches in the film. It's so beautiful. And I want to thank you so much for being here. The conversation will continue on Discord, and I hope everyone checks out your incredible film. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
All right, and we're so lucky to have the second filmmaker. We have Elise Talengut with her incredible documentary, The Fourfold. Welcome, Elise.
Oh, hi.
Hello, it's so great to be with you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
Yes, of course. It's our pleasure. There's so much to discuss in this film, but I wanted to start with my first observation, which is it's such a gorgeous kind of connection between hand and sound or voice. And I wanted to acknowledge that your hands were the things that put all these beautiful images into the film, and it's the voice of your grandmother who narrates the film and gives all these incredible teachings. And so I wanted to ask you, what was your approach as far as combining hands that place these natural elements like rivers and flowers into the film, and voice and sound. We also have an incredible musical group, the Tuvan music group, Hun Hurtu, who have their music in there. What was the relationship between hand and sound for you in your production?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so for me, the animation was animated under the camera. I was inspired by the technique and workflow by the South African artist called William Kantridge. Maybe you are familiar with. So I was inspired by the workflow. So I decided to work with many colors. So it was painted by hand on a single piece of paper with lots of textural materials and paintings, and I mixed with plants.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the animation, but I feel like the workflow was more like, it's more like making a carpet or knitting a sweater, the process. And I know that the carpet making and weaving and knotting, like knitting and all that, is kind of like a tradition, indigenous tradition around the world, everywhere in the world. And it's always made by a woman, and always made by hand. And then there's always this repetition, but at the same time, the repetition has this kind of invention. So this kind of process kind of brings up this kind of inherited themes and ideas mixed with new materials and ideas. So that I feel like that was the process of the animation. But the sound was added later. I interviewed my grandmother. But before recording, I kind of know the idea what she's gonna say. So we did the collaboration. Yeah, it was a lovely collaboration. I learned a lot from her. And by the way, the song that was used in the film, I got the license. It's a Tuvan music group, Hun Hurtu, as you mentioned, and I did a collaboration with the Bulgarian choir, Angelit. So they are the singing in the mountains. And but the song was like edited a bit for the animation. And the song is called Wave, actually. It's like many layers.
Yeah, that's so connected to the next question I wanted to ask you, because like Chris's film Trails, your film has such a strong focus on the imagery of water and the significance spiritually and emotionally to water. We see the milk libations offered to the deity, of course, the river that is continuous in the film. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of water and fluidity, even the song Wave in the film The Fourfold?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it seems it's all connected. Thank you for the question.
Yes.
So you mentioned the fluid. Yeah, there are lots of blue color, of course, and there are lots of water as well. So like in this work, I try to kind of reconsider and reclaim the idea of animism. But animism itself, it's a very fluid ontology. It's like a very fluid. For example, you consider like rocks, mountains, stones, and plants, they're alive. And then humans share this world with many persons, and only some of whom are human. So it's very like anti this kind of anthropocentric way of looking at the world. But at the same time, this kind of I showed the films in various places, and then it's interesting that how common it is, like everywhere in the world, animism. But it was practiced. It's the program name is really good, Collective Memory. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know that Alici, if you're still here with us, we seem to have lost Alici. I think, is she back? Great, excellent. Yeah. Alici, I love how you're, did you want to finish your point?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, please.
Oh, I mean, I don't know when it stopped, but anyway, that was the idea. I mean, animism is like a fluid ontology, like humans live with many living,
I love that you spoke in that way about your film, because I know that in addition to being an artist, you're also someone who is, giving to the research on your peoples. You're very involved in ethnographic dissemination. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about the role of artist who is also educator and also kind of propagator of culture. What is that kind of dynamic like when you're doing art and research?
Yeah, but I mean, they're not really, they are not enemies, but I mean, art and research, they're kind of, at the end, they're all coming together. And then the art becomes kind of like a reflection of what I read and wrote about. I think that's kind of the relationship. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah. Was there, you said that you originally had an idea of what it would be, the film, when you talked to your grandmother. Was there a reaction from her when she saw the final product? Has she seen it?
Yeah, she saw it. She thinks it's very abstract.
It's always interesting to see like the art we make and then the reaction of the people who are actually in the film, the subjects, versus the reaction of the audience. Yeah, very nice.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I agree.
just to finish off, I'm curious about we're here obviously at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, but what more does the journey have for the Fourfold? Are there other relationships that the film has to other festivals or other screenings?
Yeah, actually, it's gonna play at the Animateca in Estonia, and also POF Shorts is Tallinn Black Nights. It's in in Slovenia and Estonia. It's coming next week. Also in Alberta at Giraffe Animation Festival in Alberta. Yeah.
Very nice. That's excellent. We're lucky that we get to have you here for our first online festival, and that many people can check out the film in many different geographies. It looks like around the world, really. Will there be Q&As as well? Any moderating panels?
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, excellent. We'll hope to check that out as well in addition to today.
Thank you about the internet connection.
Oh, no problem. We loved it. Thank you so much, Alice. We're so lucky to have you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye. So we are lucky to have our third filmmaker, Gurjivan, who is the filmmaker of Haruwal. Welcome, Gurjivan Singh Balrose. Welcome to our Q&A.
Hello.
It's such a pleasure to be with you. I know that we had Alice in Berlin, Germany, and you are coming from Singapore, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. We understand it's late there. We're at many time zones because we're, I think, 2 or 3 different continents: Asia, Europe, North America today. I wanted to say that Kelly had mentioned I was on the Shorts Committee, and this was a film that just took my breath away, honestly. So thank you for being here and being open to talking about your film. And the first question I wanted to ask is, we're obviously here actually, am I correct that it's the world premiere?
Yes,
of Haruwal? So this is a really big deal. Thank you again for having your film premiere for the first time in the world at our festival. Can you tell me, it's obviously an international festival. Was the hope for this film to have an international audience?
Not exactly, because when I made this film, I made it as a gift to present to my mom. So because in the past, whenever I make something or I buy her something, she'll just keep it, but eventually she'll forget it. So I made this to give her into our experience, and from that, so because I catered every piece of the story is only for her, but then after watching it with her and saw her experience, I think this is something that can be more on an international level, where more people can see is someone who is going back home for the very first time and then seeing a whole new experience. Like it's just a myth from what they were heard before, and now reliving the whole experience all over, which I think was simply amazing for me. So it brought me closer to my mom for myself.
Yeah, I can really feel that it's obviously a very personal film that is deeply connected to her story. Of course, your story as her son. But at the same time, like I've never been to Singapore. I've never been to India. And I felt like it was such a relevant story to myself and many of my community members and friends. So it's incredible that it has that connection to that kind of very local focus on family, but also an international approach and appeal, right? And I wanted to ask you, so much of the film is about, she says, specifically a beautiful quote, she says, hearing from people and seeing are 2 different things. There's a relationship between, as a child, hearing stories of a place and then actually visually, experientially smelling and being on the land. And we couldn't have Samriti here, but we get to know her in the film, your mother. But can you tell us a little bit about the difference for her, and then for you, of course, because you're a descendant of that land too?
Sure. Because for her, I mean, because I heard the stories as she was telling me all this time, correct? So she just has been on a search, but never thinking that she would actually go. So even when I was planning on going for the trip, I had to interview my grandmother and my other aunties because they don't have a picture of it. So I had to get as much information as I could, not knowing if we could even go and visit the place. So we went there, we went to the place, and then hopefully when we went, seeing my mom experiencing from telling the stories back in Singapore and then reliving her experience, like the smell and the ambience and the space, basically, it just you would just see the lights in the eyes just lighted up, and then it's a whole experience for her, and I'm watching her that experience and I'm documenting the whole process. It was simply amazing. I gotta say, because I've never seen her this delighted, this happy in like many years, because she's constantly looking up and where we're gonna go, what we're gonna see, what we're gonna do. So that 1 week, I think it was simply amazing, which it will live on for a very long time in my mind, in my heart, especially as for my mom as well.
Yeah, you can really feel the joy and the complexity when she's there, the way that you've captured it as the director. And I'm wondering for you, what's next? Like, is this obviously the world premiere, but will there be more showings in Singapore? And how do you think, the South Asian community or the Sikh community will react to this film and connect to it when it's played locally?
I am working on a film screening once it's allowed in Singapore, especially. So on that, I'm hoping to show to more Singaporean Sikhs to actually eventually go back home and just in general for the children, they have never been to India or in China, whatsoever, in Singapore, correct? So I would want to hope that more people would go back to their homeland and then try to find out more information about it. So that's why I'm trying to inculcate into screening the film,
Very nice. And I want to leave you, but I have to ask you one more question. It's very important to me. We don't have Sam Reedy here today, but we felt connected to her through the film. What did she have a reaction to it? She's obviously the subject and the propeller of the film, but what was her reaction in seeing it?
Oh, okay. I share with you a powerful scene for me specifically, because it was a very big moment for her to rewatch it, because we watched it in a big cinema. So she's never seen herself in a big screen before. So that's one. So and I was sitting beside her, and now she was watching, and towards the end, she got a bit emotional. And the very last scene, specifically, I designed it in a way where only she would know what the scene was, because it's a bit blurry, but it's supposed to be a scene about my great grandfather's tomb. So, but she has been there. She was the one who take the stone and place it. So I cut it in a way that only she would understand it in a hint way. So, and then at the end of the film, she was tearing, and then she looked towards me, and she's like, she told me that she felt that her grandfather was being there in the very space. So I'm like, wow. Then I got emotional, like, oh my god, no. So that was a powerful moment for me and my mom.
That's great. It's always lovely to see, there's a film we see on the screen, but then there's a whole experience of the director and the subject and the relationship they have, and how that lives on even after the first few screenings. It's incredible. And also to see how the theme, of course, is collective memory, and you've done many technical things in your filmmaking to evoke memory. So we wouldn't have been able to see that without this Q&A. And I really thank you so much for your time. And we thank your mother for inviting us into such a personal story. Thank you so much, Gurjavin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Me.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you.
Have a good day. Okay. Bye.
Goodbye. We're so pleased to have Gurjavin, and we get to have another filmmaker. I'm super excited to present this person. So it's Jan Park, who is the filmmaker of the awe-inspiring, funny, strange, very moving film, I Bought a Time Machine. Welcome, Yeon Park.
Thank you so much for
Hello.
the introduction. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
good.
Yeah, I'm still, I think I'm here in my home, but I'm also still thinking about all those incredible scenes in your film.
Thank you so much.
It's quite unique and innovative as a film. I'll get right into it. It's you buy your dad a time machine from eBay for his birthday, and he tells you that he doesn't have regrets. He's good. So you have to find creative ways to get rid of the machine. Can you tell me a little bit about the power of a time machine and what you're trying to convey in this film?
Okay, I think as you see in the film, I actually never use a time machine, or you never see the time machine actually being used. But just by bringing it up, just by asking how would you use this time machine, or just even by mentioning the existence of this time machine, people get to, like my mom, she would talk about her childhood memories and would depict it so visually as if she's in that moment, right? So I think that was the part of the time machine that I noticed even before starting to make this film. I would just talk about my film to people and ask the same question to people, like my friends or even just random people that I met at parties. Like, if you had this machine, if I gave this to you as a gift, how would you use it? And that would just open up the conversation and just bring up like so many like private stories. Even from people that I had never talked to. So that's when I realized when I was brainstorming for this film that maybe the time machine could still be useful even without being used. So that's why I also left it up to the viewers at the end, because I use it at the end, but I don't really show or talk about where I go, right, visually. Because I think the time machine has this power to make people imagine and immerse themselves into their own past.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's a portal, but at the same time, it almost becomes a character in the film. Like the subjects are obviously you appear in the film, your brother, your mother, your father, and then this time machine almost is like a character. Did you start to think about it as a character at all?
It became the character because just by being there, the time machine, it just felt like it was staring at me, asking like, what would you do with me? Like, it's like the past visualized into this sparkly box. So yeah, at first, I filmed everything's real in the film, FYI. So I didn't even know what the time machine looked like before buying it. And I didn't even know if it was going to arrive. And after actually having it in my hands, its existence grew so big in the film and in the filmmaking process as well. So I kind of started treating it like a character, even during the filmmaking process.
Very nice. It's interesting because I think for many people, the idea of a time machine might be really scary or frightening because exploring the past can be a hard thing for a lot of people. But there is such a humorous and light approach that you have to the film. You're still exploring some dark and uncomfortable things, but the approach is so humorous and light in many instances. So I'm curious why you chose humor as an approach to speaking about the history of one's family and one's country.
Okay, so it was actually hard to go around humor because, as you see in the film, the eBay description is hilarious. Like the fact that, the idea of time travel could be more serious and darker, but just the fact that this time machine is being sold on eBay for like $200, and I had to bid for that price. That was just so hilarious that I had to go with the humor. I couldn't just be serious while showing this time machine on eBay. Like, I showed just a part of the description, but you can actually Google and see the full description where it says things like Edison would never have invented the light bulbs without this particular time machine, or like the history would have been different. And there are like so many examples that are caused by this time machine. So I had to go with that. And I guess the harder thing was to transition from this humorous
Yes.
instance to more like serious contemplation and moments like that. And once I switched to that mode, it's also hard to get back to the humor. So that was the challenge for me, to have that humor and the seriousness coexist in the film. But humor was just no choice for me.
Yeah. You know what? Just before the second film, The Fourfold, there was a metaphor of weaving the story. I feel like you weaved and threaded together the humor and the maybe darkness or complexity of memory so well. And I wanted to thank you so much. This is such an outstanding film, and I really hope that audiences get to explore the time machine and the past as a vehicle for exploring family and country and history. It's incredible to be with you, and again, I congratulate you on your incredible film.
Thank you so much. It was really nice talking to you. This was actually my first Q&A ever after being a filmmaker, because it debuted during the pandemic. So it was really an honor to talk to you.
First of many. Hopefully we'll have you again at Real Asian.
Yay.
And we'll get to follow you around the world at different international film festivals. So what an honor for us as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Have a good day. Excellent. We are super fortunate again to have another very talented filmmaker. We have Warren Chen, who is the director of I Dream of Vancouver. Welcome, Warren. This was another film that had a really strong impact on me, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be here to animate the film and give it life for us so we can talk about all the incredible dynamics of it. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, I can hear you quite well. And I love your background as well. I can see you really well. I wanted to start off this is such a meaningful exploration of Google Maps, a technology that has the power to alter our physical space for the purpose of profit. It is a company, and often at the detriment of local people, specifically in East Vancouver, a neighborhood of Vancouver. And so I wanted to ask you about the visual experience of the film. That's one of the most striking things, right? There's fragments of digital images, snapshots. Can you talk about the relationship between the content and the way that you displayed the film in such a gorgeous visual way?
So when I set out to make this film, the visual aspects of it was kind of one of the first things I landed on, and I was interested in examining these images and how these aren't just images that are windows that lead directly to a profilmic space, and I wanted to show that these images are actually kind of refracted and distorted through something. So that was what I was hoping to try to communicate with the imagery in this film.
Yeah, I could really feel the way that the imagery almost modeled or copied the way human memory manifests. And the way that it's altered by these digital technologies is extremely effective. I also wanted to ask you about the specific geography of your film. The film is called I Dream of Vancouver, and you've really illustrated the impact of Google Maps on a specific neighborhood in the city, which is East Vancouver. So what is the relationship that you see in the film between technologies like Google Maps and in this case, Chinatown, which is in East Vancouver, and different Asian and BIPOC communities? There's a lot of Indigenous folks who live in Chinatown in East Vancouver. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between those technologies and those communities?
Yeah, so well, I've made the film about East Vancouver just because that's where I'm from. But specifically when it comes to neighborhoods like Chinatown and the downtown East Side, those are neighborhoods that are facing a lot of gentrification, and it's interesting to look at the relationship between that issue and how that space is being represented on platforms such as Google Maps. So of course I realized that that's meant for outsiders. Like if you live somewhere, you don't really need to refer to a map to know where things are. But there is this difference between kind of traditional maps, like illustrated maps, and these new types of map that use photographic images. And it's very easy to look at these photographic images and kind of see that as a neutral, unbiased depiction of the world. So that was, and over time, like these images could kind of create this idealized version of a space, and especially when that's kind of happening at the same time as gentrification, that could lead to very impacts on the inhabitants of those spaces.
Yeah, there's a few voices that we hear in the film, and they talk about how, like many of us, as soon as we need to go somewhere, we open our phones, we turn them on, and we put in an address for Google Maps. It plays a very big role in all our lives. And so I'm wondering, for you, like, do you believe, as a filmmaker who's really explored very deeply these themes, that these technologies can be altered or shifted to meet the needs of the local people who live in these neighborhoods?
I think so, but I don't know if it's possible when those technologies are being controlled by things like Google. Like when it's Google Maps, it will always serve Google's agenda, and I don't know if that agenda will ever fit the needs of those local communities. But in an ideal world, I don't see why these technologies couldn't exist in a form that's created through kind of open source methods and that are able to kind of speak more to the local communities and their needs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that would happen, but
yeah, I wonder about that world. And I think you've done an incredible job at really disturbing the myth that these technologies are neutral or innocent or objective, that there is a lot of power relationships that exist. And you do that through a lot of audio. Can you tell us a little bit about those subjects? We hear their voices and their relationship to the city.
Yeah, so those are just three friends of mine. This film was created as a project that I did for class. So I kind of had to do this really quickly. So I just interviewed my friends. Had I had more time, maybe I would have been able to speak more to like people in the community. But the way I tried to position the film and was to kind of build a narrative where we first talk about our experiences and how we're impacted by Google Maps technologies and that relationship to gentrification and how that pushes out the DIY art spaces that we go to. But then beyond that, without trying to speak for other communities, try to look at how these same issues impact others in much more serious ways.
Yeah. And I think it's obviously a film that has such a global relevance. You've used the specificity of East Vancouver to tell that story, but I could see this film living on beyond Real Asian, and it's really such an honor to have the film here and to be able to speak to you. I want to thank you, Warren, for giving all those insights, especially into the technical and multimedia aspect of the film. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Great. We have an incredible duo coming up. We're going to mix it up a little. We have a great combination of director and subject. We have the director, Anthony Wing of Farming Slowly, and we have the subject, Catherine Wing of Farming Slowly. So I want to welcome both of them to our Real Asian Q&A. What an honor to not only have the filmmaker, but really someone who's really driving the narrative, the subject. Catherine, thank you for being here.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I want to dive right in because there's a lot in the film, and we've spoken earlier with some of the panelists that water is a big theme in this showcase. we certainly see water in terms of watering the plants and farming slowly, but I find that there's such a connection to like physical land, earth, ground in this film. And so my first question is for Anthony. Anthony, we focus on very closely to 2/3 of an acre of land, which is Mora Mora Farm. And there's such a intimate connection that we get as an audience to the land. Can you talk a little bit about capturing that through film? We have the gorgeous landscape, the colors of the vegetables, even the taste of the vegetables. How did you do that on a technical level using film to capture land?
Yeah, so as far as that, I did think about that a lot, and I figured doing like close up and macro shots was the best way to like see into the land, I guess, and get closer and make a connection towards it. And especially with the slow motion, we're able to kind of be with there and explore and kind of reflect on the land and what's around us. Also the sound, I work as a sound mixer by trade, so sound is obviously an important part of my filmmaking. So I think sound really captures like the feeling with music and the sound design, and like say like she would like snap a vegetable and you would hear that snap,
Yes.
or she would like water the vegetable, so you hear the water. So I think that's very encompassing and engaging as far as getting to be with the land or with the vegetables. Yeah.
Yeah, it can really, now that you've mentioned your background as a sound mixer, I can really feel that. Like there's of course like that, the crunch of the land, but like wrapping with elastics, you can hear everything. There's such a strong soundscape in the film, and that really comes through.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's important. I think sound allows you to feel with music and with sound design, and the images allow you to see what's going on and to understand what you're feeling.
Yeah, and I think it gives a lot of insight to Catherine, right? She's the main subject of the film, of course. We see a lot of her and her relationship to her farm. Catherine, I wanted to just point out that we learn about you when you're on your plot of land. We learn about you through your customers, and then when you're directly addressing the camera, we learn about you as a person, but your relationship to others. And I'm curious about, we find ourselves in a strange time right now. A lot of us are solitary. A lot of us are kind of changing our relationships to people. So I want to ask you, for this film, Farming Slowly, what is the relationship that we learn about our relationship ourselves and then also to other people?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It definitely made me think. And I think that what we learn is that being solitary is really hard. And I think people are finding that out, especially now with everyone in quarantine and everything that's going on. Yeah, I think that it's one of the harder things, but one of the best things in that I think it really reveals what you value if you can sit long enough in it. And as far as like what I've learned about myself is that I have a tendency to want to distract myself in those times. Like it's way easier to be like on social media or in Netflix than to actually like sit and be still and to find that inner peace. I think solitude is way more than just being like alone by yourself in a room, but like, do you feel okay in that space? And yeah, I think what I learned also about our relationship with others through farming is that I feel like it's just so counter to how we grew up, how we were raised, especially in this environment where there is like a high, and I talk about this in the film, there is like a high value on production and efficiency. And that's just not how relationships or connection work. Like it's not an efficient process. And that's like one of the things that I appreciate about farming is that it forces me in a way to let go of some of those like high production standards that people tell me I should have, and invest in the relationships that I have around me.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes left, and I wanted to ask a little bit. We're really lucky to have both of you. In many of the films, we just have the director. And so I wanted to learn about, Anthony, you emphasized sound as a big, prominent force in the film. And Catherine, you talked about these interesting aspects around efficiency and what that means in terms of interrupting how we understand relationships. What was your kind of relationship together, collaborating together to create this film? Can you speak a little bit about that a little bit before we finish?
Yeah. So I mean, me and Catherine are cousins, and we grew up together. So literally all 5 or 7 days shooting the film was just us laughing and making inside jokes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, and then I also stayed at her house up in Portland. So we had a lot of time together, had a lot of time to like talk about farming, about food, about land, about filmmaking. And I got to learn a lot. Also, she made me like shovel compost and do all this work. And I'm just like, let me just film. This is so much easier. Making a film is so much easier than holding down a farm.
It was like probably the best week of my summer. It was so funny. Usually that time of the season is like so stressful because there's just like so many things to do. But having my cousin up there was like, okay, everything's okay. Even if the farm, like, even if I don't get all these things done, everything's okay. Yeah.
We have a lot of time to talk about, like even afterwards. So she'll update me on like weekly newsletters about her farm and how the farm is doing. So it's good to just keep updated with everything that's going on, and I don't know, maybe make a film too whenever the time's right.
It brings so much more meaning to this idea of collective memory, learning a little bit more about your relationships and that dynamic. I know someone from Relation was saying, after the pandemic, our hope, if you allow us, Catherine, is to make a field trip to Mora Mora. Maybe do some background documenting of the next documentary that you make together.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Thank you so much. I know, Catherine, you're at is it the last week of the season?
Yeah, so I'm stoked.
Okay. Best of luck with that season, end of the season. And Anthony, we both love this film. It's so outstanding and has really touched us. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great day. Take good care.
Thanks. You too. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
So our final film and filmmaker is ready. We have the immense pleasure and privilege to have our final film, Ama, Women of the Sea. And we have the director with us, Georgie Yukiko Donovan. Welcome, Georgie.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And you're coming from, where are you located? Can you tell us?
In London, in the UK.
Okay, excellent. So we've had 3 different continents here, many countries. Really appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure.
Ama, Women of the Sea is, again, a film that I saw on the Shorts Committee, and we were all blown away by the beauty, the exploration in the film. And we had the opportunity really to dive right into the film, because you really bring us there.
Literally.
Could you give us a little bit of that experience, a little bit about what it was like to finally get in the water as far as smell and what you saw?
I'll be honest, it's all a bit of a blur, because we were supposed to be diving every single day with them for about a week. But that didn't happen because a typhoon hit the week we were supposed to film. So we ended up, what was supposed to be a week's worth of underwater filming ended up being 2 hours to get everything we needed. So a lot of it was just a huge amount of adrenaline. The water was still very choppy. That was one of the things we really struggled with. Even after the typhoon passed, the water was so churned up that we couldn't get in. But to be honest, once I was in the water, I was just so mesmerized by the ama themselves, especially some of the older ama in their like mid 80s. So, they're walking along the beach and they're hunched over and they're these little old, grannies. And I'm watching them climb over the rocks being like, oh my God, if they fall over, like they're going to, crack a hip or something. But the minute they got in the water, it was like they were just off. And they're so graceful and so quick. And really, it was just me trying to keep up with them and kind of just stand back and, like, I guess, bear witness to all of it. And try not to pass out.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I remember that scene, like you were saying, like, I've just been here for 5 minutes and I'm already tired, but they're down in the water doing their thing. And it's perfect to have you at the end of this showcase because your film is obviously another film that explores water. Many of them do, and in such a gorgeous way, you document what seems and is very much such an important thing to document, right? And we're talking about the survival of the ama and the relationship to climate change. There's actually a question for you from the audience.
Oh, sure.
And it's related to the typhoon. So someone's asking, or saying rather, first, I love ama so much. We got fan, like many of us here. Are you upset the storms happened, or do you feel it made the film better?
I think it definitely, in the end, it made for a better film. While it was happening at the time, I was cursing the gods, wondering why this was happening to me. But actually, I think it was, in many ways, one of the best things that could have happened for us, because I think the impact of the typhoon wasn't just on our production, but actually seeing the impact on the ama and their lives, I think really brings into focus what they're dealing with. And I think makes the ama inherently more reflective in terms of when I was speaking to them, because they were suddenly kind of bound to the land, as it were. They couldn't go out and dive. So there was a lot more time for reflection. And then, also just seeing the aftermath of the typhoon and physically seeing the amount of, plastic and stuff that just washed up onto the ocean was a real like visual gut punch for me. So, I think all in all, it was definitely worth it, and it made for an unforgettable shooting experience for sure.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of interest from the Q&A, so I'm going to jump into a second question, which is similar, but maybe a little bit different, which is, how did the impact of the typhoon change the final film from the original concept?
So originally we were going to spend, we were going to spend more time with more ama, if that makes sense. We were going to, and we had also interviewed a professor, and I guess it was going to be a bit more of a kind of overview on all these different issues. But I think because the typhoon happened, it kind of focused everything, but through that we were able to actually touch on a lot of the issues we wanted to without having to necessarily spell it out. Certainly like all of the stuff inside the hotel would never have happened if it hadn't been for the typhoon, because we were physically trapped in the hotel. But even that, actually that brought a bit of levity to the film that maybe I wouldn't necessarily have thought to do if we hadn't been trapped and wandering around this empty hotel. But, I think the biggest thing for me is just the conversations we were able to have took a very different form because of the typhoon. And actually the two women that we went to their ama goya, their ama hut, and we had lunch with them. They were literally just we met them, we weren't allowed to dive, and we basically didn't know what else to film anymore. And we just ended up sort of being like, do you mind if we come in and talk to you? And they ended up being, two of the most endearing people that you see in the film. So really, it completely reshaped, the film, almost to the point where I can't even remember what my original vision was for it, because this whole thing just took on a life of its own.
Yeah, something that the Shorts Committee observed was, you're in the hut with them and they're cooking, right? Is it correct, that scene? And you have like the shells literally opening as gorgeous food scenes, and they're also opening up, right? You almost like that double meaning. And you have that in the typhoon, whereas it's a disruption to your production, but it's also a very material disruption to the livelihood and the ongoing work of the ama. So there's so much richness in the film. And we only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to ask you, I think it's, again, such beautiful timing that you're the final person in this showcase, because not only is your film very central around water, but I think this idea of collective memory sometimes is seen as a more ephemeral, abstract concept, remembering one's family's story. But in the case of the ama, memory has a very material, tangible consequence, remembering a certain craft or a certain way of work. Can you talk about the very real material consequences of memory and maintaining memory for the ama?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's almost what the fear is that, right now there are still ama active and diving, but the numbers are dwindling at a really rapid rate. And the fear is actually that they will just pass into memory. On the flip side, you also have, their skill and their knowledge is passed down from one, mother's memory to the daughters and generationally. So it's almost like those two things are kind of in tension at the moment, because the passed down knowledge and the memories, and it's almost inherent in their DNA. I think one of the ama talked about the fact that she was diving while she was 8 months pregnant. It's not just like, it's not even just like memory that's in their forefront. It's kind of like built into the way that they come into the world. But the question now becomes, as those numbers of the original ama are slowly disappearing and maybe they're not being passed down through the maternal line, what is the consequence of then opening it up and allowing other people into this, what there has been a kind of familial closed circuit kind of community. And I think that's probably universal of a lot of things in the world at the moment. There's lots of precious knowledge out there. How do we both honor it, but also help it survive, and also use it for us to kind of move forward and take that knowledge and learn from it? I think with the ama, with everything that's going on with global warming and climate change, communities like the ama hold so much knowledge that we're just not utilizing, and they know better than anyone what's happening in the ocean, because they're in it every single day. So I think it's a tough thing to balance, but it's worth fighting for, because the loss would not just be to them, but it would be to all of us, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you can really see how the connection between memory and memory as knowledge, memory as survival in this film. And it's neat that we keep on mentioning the typhoon, but it is quite significant because it plays this role at really understanding the disruption, not just of the typhoon, but of climate change and the way that the Earth is changing and how it is a disruption to memory and survival.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's a big part of the reason the ama are diminishing, is because what they're able to take from the ocean now is reduced so dramatically because of climate change, the amount of abalone that they can get. I can't remember if it's in the film or not, but they told me about just diving down and seeing tons of seaweed just dead from the ocean literally just being too warm, or even stories of them becoming overheated in the sea because the water had warmed up so much. And it's they're kind of on the forefront of all of this, and it's that there's a direct correlation to their survival and whether we tackle this very imminent danger.
Yeah, and thank you for capturing that. It is such a documentary that has impact of documenting a story that is so crucial for many folks in the Asian diaspora, but around the globe. And we really appreciate you being here to talk to us about it. So thank you so much, Georgie.
Thank you so much for having
me. It's a pleasure.
Wow, that was such a great Q&A, Sahar. That was amazing. Thank you. On that, I just wanted to make a note that our ASL interpreter, we're having a few issues. Please note that this is recorded and will be closed captioned. So for folks, for accessibility reasons, feel free to come back. It will be closed captioned and made accessible at a later time. I think on that note, I'd really like to thank all of our lovely guests. I think this one Q&A session featured guests from just really everywhere in the world. And we had folks joining in very early in the morning to really late in the evening, at night, or I guess early in the morning, depending how you see it. So I just want to thank all of them. If you're looking to continue the conversation about these films, we do have the Real Asian Film Forum on Discord, so please join us there. Sahar, again, you are such a loving and wonderful moderator, so thank you so much for sharing your time, energy, and care here. I'd also like to acknowledge the amazing support and thank you, Emma. I know you're not here to hear it, but Emma, our ASL interpreter from Toronto Sign Language Interpretation Service. Also, huge thanks to Mimi and Joe, our lovely digital producers, and everyone here attending. So on that, Real Asian runs until November 19th, so there's still time to watch films, catch panels, and join in on the discussion. Though today at 11:59, that is our closing time to buy tickets. Oh, hello, welcome back, Emma. Thank you. So make sure to get your tickets so to ensure that you have 48 hours to watch the films. And on that note, you can find more information on realasian.com. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.